You are now listening to the #MBDA Conversations podcast. In this podcast, you will be informed and empowered about MBDA's social, spatial, and economic transformation programs in Nelson Mandela Bay. Stay tuned. From the implementers of Safety and Peace through an urban upgrading program funded by KFW comes a story of resilience and lessons. Helenvale, the book, gives you a closer look into the hopes and dreams of a challenged community, a common story across South Africa. Helenvale, a story of resilience and lessons for development practitioners. Available for download at helenvalestory.co.za or email helenvalestory@mbda.co.za for your free copy today.
Good evening, everyone. It has been an eventful night with nice music. Just for a few moments, we would just be having further conversations. I was worried when I was listening to the previous speakers already talking about the questions I'd planned to ask. And then I was like, no, I'm going to go and cut you, Debbie. I'm going to cut you, Neil, because you're supposed to be adding that content in this platform. However, we'll find ways of actually also deepening the discussion, as I know that I'm dealing with development practitioners, people who have given it much thought, even broader than Helenvale sometimes, but will be able to help us think through some of the challenges that you are facing. I want to welcome you to this platform. In front of me, I have people who have dealt with this question of development, and I also have people who have experienced Helenvale in ways that we have not experienced Helenvale. Contrary to popular belief, when we're dealing with a book launch, we're not necessarily talking about what is really entailed in the book, even though we're going to reflect because we're going to read what is there. But we want to talk about maybe some of the experiences, the stories that probably even couldn't make it. There was not enough ink to print some of the text. But I want to start with Debbie. I have this thought in mind. You'll tell me if this resonates with you. To develop an iconic world-class city, showcasing its diversity of people, culture, heritage, and environment. I want you to think on this, maybe talk to us, and how this links to Helenvale, the project, the diversity of the people, the heritage, the environment. Maybe just to break the silence.
So you've just quoted our vision, our mission statement of the MBDA. And I think, we think development is construction number one. It is about the people. It's not brick and mortar, it's about the human capital development. And if you look at a human being, it's covering the basics. It's issues of, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And as we develop, you've got to deal with the basics. And development is, the basics are covered, where you develop the individual to the next level, to the point where they are self-actualized to take care of their own needs and not government dependent. You have to look at that individual's environment. You have to look at the social construct of where they come from. I had an interesting chat with board member Odia earlier, and come with the empathy of why can't they just fix themselves? I mean, the waste is a good example. Helenvale is incredibly dirty at the moment. Do you know, I have a sense that people don't see that it's dirty anymore. The environment is so polluted. It is an indication of the state that community finds itself in. It doesn't even see, the kids are growing up in that filthy conditions. They don't see it anymore. So when we talk about upliftment, you have to talk about the individual, you have to talk about the environment, you have to understand where they're going, what the family dynamics are, and you've got to address those things. You can't just build a road there and the house here is not impacted by that road. The development must come into that household.
Yeah.
There's a lot of healing that needs to happen. There's a thing that we have to go back and fix. Ons wil nie die goed te praat, ons wil dit nie worry. Deep hurt, deep trauma. We are incredibly aggressive towards each other. Where does that thing come from? It's trauma. And Lerato Musa is doing psychosocial. It's a strange thing. What is this psychosocial? You have to deal with the mind. So Helenvale to us is a concentration, a pressure cooker of the issues that we see in society. It's a very good example of the work that the MBDA does.
Because whenever you speak about development, there's a reason why I was asking that question. I get the sense that development should be original. There's an element of originality. It originates from this particular community. And we cannot develop anything if we take it anywhere else, if we don't start with that community or people. And if we have a vision as a city, as Mandela Bay Development Agency, that is to take this city to the world, it needs to start with the people of the city. I'm going to come back to you because you basically our anchor as an executive, as an operations executive at MBDA. I'm going to go to Neil Kempfer, who really has done a sterling work in giving us a moment in time, right? Because when you write something and you put that full stop, and then now it has to go to other hands, there's already a today and a tomorrow that is occurring that might be a change, that might not look like the book. Or is there any experience like that when you look at the book now, you feel like, I wish I would have added this. This has occurred past this point. I want your reflection on the finalization of your report and the book.
Yeah, I think I was just off camera. I was just talking to Desira about the kind of stuff that when you write anything, you need to make sure that it's fairly reflected. As I said in my opening remarks, there are at least 7 budding chapters of content that for this volume or this document was left out because the choices that we had to make about what were the core things for the MBDA experience. One of the regrets and possible opportunities, Ms. Meyer, is that the stories of the Helenvale communities is captured only on a digital format through videos that we have done. We did focal areas around domestic violence, youth employment, and the voices of the communities was captured therein. But it was not sufficient to tell those stories in the nuanced depth. And that's one of the regrets that one has with these sort of things. But it was important for MBDA to say, when we take a 360 view, at the very least, we now can say to policymakers and planners that we need to consider or reconsider some of our approaches and challenge the system within to do better. Because the problem is not the lived experience with communities only. The problem is in how we value that at equal in the power relation between policy, funders, and the intent behind development investment. If communities are left as the beneficiary model, where they stand and wait for things to happen, we are doing disservice to them. And that's why we see so much protest against impositions of ideas. And that's why the learning lessons for MBDA, and certainly for the city, has got to be, we need to articulate things. I'll make a practical example. On Cobus Road, in front of what was the stoop, there's an area called the stoop, and in front of there was the councillor's office, the old councillor's office. Right in front, Du Plessis was there. Right in front of his office is a stormwater drain, 3 square meters. What are you talking about when you talk about change of development funding, when you can't even, and Helenvale is a hot place for many reasons. That sun bakes on that place like crazy. And so when the kids are saying, let's find an imaginative way to use the hundreds of thousands of liters of fresh rainwater that flows through the main artery of Helenvale, to use it in an innovative way, are we stone deaf as planners to think, hey, there's a problem here, there's a solution also? An example is Sam Wenzel at Helenvale Primary. They stuck and got a contractor to give them a pump. Put the pump in that further up, Helenvale Primary, put the pump in the stormwater drain, pumped the stormwater drain into tanks at the school, and they high pressure cleaned the entire school's roof. That was a social entrepreneurial approach to a problem that they had of cleansing the school from decades of mold and dust, and they did it on their own effort. Why can we not see that as part of the solution? Why must everything go through a tender? Why must everything go through consultants when communities are the owners of the solutions, but they don't have the freedom? We actually straitjacket development when we do that. And that is why a lot of the stories in Helenvale is not being said. Helenvale has got an inordinate amount of storm water that runs through that place for weeks after the fact. And it's all lost when we are a dry city, when we are a drought city. There's something fundamentally wrong with our appreciation for the natural and the human assets that we are not bringing into stories. And that is one of the omissions and opportunities for further reflection on this. I know that there has been conversations with the Helenvale community at the stadium, and we spent an entire week reviewing video footage of that to incorporate the sense of that. But we will never do justice to how people actually experience that. And in these small storylines is the kernel of what can be, the possibility that can be. And I think that's part of the solution.
Thank you. With those opening remarks, I'm going to come back to you because you're going to tell us of the experience since you were appointed as part of this consultation group that dealt with Helenvale. And I don't want to reintroduce everyone, but this is the one person that I think I should reintroduce because you've already had some moments of fame earlier in the program. Mrs. Desira Davids, you are a qualified social worker, a stakeholder and a practitioner. You've had a unique view of the project at Helenvale and you stay in the community. I really want you to give us, because we don't have much time, but I want you to give us some kind of a community perspective. There must have been some bad. They probably won't tell us. There must have been some good. Probably the community can tell us better as well. I want you to be able to have a conversation in a way, probably respectful, but that gives us the community aspect.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity for having me here tonight. I actually didn't think that I would be speaking on that. But like I said, sometimes I wear too many caps. And I don't know whether it's an advantage or a disadvantage at times. But Debbie knows me. From the inception of the HERB program in 2007, I was then the chairperson of the youth sector because there was a multi-sectoral approach. And listening at Debbie now, I can really appreciate the fact that she has come so far and learned a lot, because I know when she came there the first time when we started, and it was during the social compact of 2007, and we were various sectors in the old resource center. We were really fighting, obviously to get our points across. And as a social worker also now, that time I didn't have my degree there, but I was actively involved as a volunteer in the community. And I can remember, we had arguments, I personally had arguments with the previous CEO, Pierre Voges, about the principles of community development. And I was really emphasizing the principle of ownership and including the community in decision-making processes. And at the time, he didn't take it well. He was really offended. And at the time, his famous words was, "I'm just a simple Dutchman." and you are the cleverest of the community and you know everything. But it is like that. At the end of the day, community development in itself is a very complex, tedious, exhausting process. And in the context of Helenvale, like Debbie already said, and I've done my master's, also my research in the community, in Helenvale, my own community, you know, where the gangs and the gangsterism issue also started in the 1950s already. You can think that, you know, doing community development in a community such as Helenvale is even more complex and difficult because, you know, we have been previously traumatized. We have gone through, and I love the fact that the title of the book is Resilience. But my question, and I think as a social worker also I would like to ask, and I think this a book, because I don't necessarily see it as a book, but I really, when I read it, it was more like, you know, like Neil was saying, there's a lot of things that is lacking, that is absent perhaps. But I think it can make recommendations to not only development practitioners and government, but I think really government must see that at the end of the day, you know, it's like Debbie said, we don't have a chip on our shoulder with regards to our colonial past, but it did have a tremendous effect. And when I did my research in the terms, focusing on, Neil was one of my participants, in terms of how our apartheid colonial past had and direct impact on the gang issue specifically in my community. You know, they are deeply rooted issues. And coming into a community, not having community development history or background, like most of the staff of MBDA, you know, they come there with a construction background. You have a degree in, you know, mortar and architecture, and you don't know, you know, the human psyche. You don't have, you know, understanding in terms of the psychosocial issues that Helenvale is grappling with. It is actually very. I mean, I'm from the community. I've been the project manager of an NPO running programs for the past 15 years, but I'm telling you, even being from the community doesn't spare me, you know, from having to deal with, you know, people that really, if they don't understand and if they don't, you know, trust you, and if there's other influences, you know, telling them to not trust you, and also past experiences, specifically with people coming from the outside claiming to be the saviors of the community. That is a problem in Helenvale. You must not come and tell us you are here to save us. We have been resilient for 60 plus years. We have been surviving for 60 plus years. Our ancestors has been surviving for 60 plus years in that very community. So don't come and tell us, you know, we have been here. We know what we want. And I think from that perspective, the lessons that have been learned, and I think one of the staff members is actually now pursuing a degree in development studies, and I think it's because of the experiences and the lessons that they took from the development that took place in my community that actually led to her pursuing that in order to understand development better, especially in the context of community development.
You are listening to #MBDA Conversations. Be part of the conversation by sending your voice notes to our WhatsApp line 072 423 0271. From the implementers of Safety and Peace through an urban upgrading program funded by KFW comes a story of resilience and lessons. Helenvale, the book, gives you a closer look into the hopes and dreams of a challenged community, a common story across South Africa. Helenvale, a story of resilience and lessons for development practitioners. Available for download at helenvalestory.co.za or email helenvalestory@mbda.co.za for your free copy today.
There's a question that I also want to bring, because Helenvale is, according to the book, it's in a 274 hectare piece of land, and it was meant for 6,000 people. Currently, we have 21,000 people. Probably more, right? Because again, anything that is written the following day might be outdated. So we have this pressure. I'm coming back to you, Debbie. We have this pressure as the entity now, a developmental entity that is also tasked to deal with this 274 hectare piece of land, with all the issues that are coming out of the bad ones first, and then we're going to end with the good ones. What is MBDA's future approach first, and then what do we do next from the past approach of the book, and then what do we do next?
Thank you, Olwam. I think one of the key lessons is that, you know what, when you design a program, you have an idea of what the needs are and what you will do. A lot of those things we've done. So what I ask myself is, going forward, what has worked and what hasn't worked? But the question is maybe, what constitutes success? It's a very subjective thing, because my idea of success and your success is not. I still think it's too early to tell. We just finished the sports field now. That's not the success. The success is the sports stars and the kids that are diverted from negative activities as a result of that. You must measure this thing 10, 15 years from now in terms of how successful it's been. So MBDA going forward wants to obviously track the impact of this. So, I mean, the lessons learned is not, I mean, I said earlier, you don't reap in the same season that you've sowed. So you're not going to see how the impact that this has had on communities, the human development aspect now. You can tick a box and say, milestone achieved, project delivered, but the impact of that project, we are still very interested in measuring what has worked and what has not worked. I think going forward is also, we've taken, the board chairs alluded to it, in terms of the next 5-year plan. We plan in 5-year cycles because we're subject to the municipal system process as well. Is for the next 5 years to focus less on infrastructure and focus on the human capital development, specifically youth, women, children, the issues of GBV, the issues of early childhood development, the issues of high school dropout rates. If we can get the kids, Helenvale's got a school dropout rate of more than 70%, Neil? 70% don't finish school. If we can get the partners together going forward to look after our youth, and the first thing is to stop them dropping up from school. Zara's got a beautiful program. How do you reintroduce them, those that have dropped? Otherwise, they are prey for the gang bosses and for the lures of easy money and those sort of things. So going forward, our focus, not just in Helenvale, the MBDA as a whole, is in a spot of doing introspection of these things that we've been doing, parks and sidewalks and in the inner city and whatever. Does that translate to transformation of our communities and real development? So going forward, we are challenged. I said earlier, everybody talks about we must address the youth, but what is the plan? That will be our focus going forward, is investing in youth development.
And how has the process and the experience changed the internal stuff? I know that now someone is already doing their honors in development studies as a result of the experience. So the change is not only from the community perspective, it's also internal, and I suppose it will be how we view planning and development from internally.
Yeah, I think if you read the stories from the staff, you'll see that. I mean, you'll see Giovanni's piece, for instance. Giovanni's a civil engineer, but he writes as a social activist. So the consciousness of not just what you do, but the reason why we're doing it. And the reason to hang in there, and the reason if they knock you down today, you just come back tomorrow, because the reason is more important than you just, achieving your little objective. So the staff is very challenged. And I think we try to keep, I certainly in my team, the conversation going about, guys, the reason we're doing here is bigger than us. It's something you can be proud of. It's a legacy that we can build on. And a legacy is not the organization. It's not the MBDA. The MBDA is the people of the MBDA. So that's been changing for myself. I'm an urban planner by profession. I don't think like an urban planner. I think like a social worker, and that is the nuanced development approach, that you've got to think holistically. It's not in isolation. You can't just think, I'm an environmentalist, I just do the environmental impact assessment. I'm the psychologist, I just do this. You have to think integratedly.
And then, Neil, again, as someone who has been tasked with this project at Helenvale from quite early on, I would like us to maybe learn through you how has been carrying the task of a funder, the obligations that needs to be given back to the funder, looking at the community and being able to respond because you see what is happening, and did all of that manage to come out in the book?
No, not all of it. Some of it. I can tell you that it is incredibly difficult to balance the demands of community at the grassroots level with an institution with like an MBDA stuck in the middle of doing international development assistance funding and reporting on different levels: council, the board, the funder, and the funder, KfW Development Bank, is responsible to German Technical and Development Corporation, which is the taxpayer. And the requirements are quite hectic in terms of auditing. So nothing that we plan or want to do doesn't go without going through 3 or 4 different levels of checks and being signed off before we move on a thing. There's drawdowns, for sure. So from a project administration point of view, that's been, I think, for Debbie and the team, have been a big learning lesson initially, and then towards the end, like we kind of got into the flow of it. There's also the challenge of managing, as I mentioned right earlier, is the engagement of interdepartmental participation around various different things. I'll give you a practical example. Domestic violence and victim support is one of the subcomponents. Safer schools was a subcomponent. Youth employment was a subcomponent. Those were constituted the softer components of the project, the others being technical infrastructure, road infrastructure, lights, and those sort of things. But the socioeconomic approach needed to be an integrated one. So some of the schools in Helenvale are surrounded by 2 or 4 or 5 gangs, depending on which one. And you can't just go in and plug a development program, because there are physical territorial issues that you have to deal with. By the way, the community has to face that every day. So who are we to complain about those conditions? So on a practical level, when you do a psychosocial intervention for domestic violence within a school environment, immediately when we started, remember, Desira, in 2014, putting together the Safer Schools Committee to focus just on the issue of safety at schools is a major thing, because now all of a sudden the principals are surrounded by insecurity. The fencing is a problem, the gangs are a problem, the newspapers are full of gangs running across and into the school, and then you have to come up with a program that says we will help with safer schools. So the design of a program needs to look at things like psychosocial support for kids that are suffering trauma. When we did the initial interventions at the schools, a vacant classroom, converted, trained and capacitated community members to actually do first level trauma debriefing services and referrals from there. We picked up an additional 50% of caseloads that the non-profits like White Door of Hope and Victim Support Center, they didn't pick that up in the school because they were not placed in school except White Door of Hope at Bayview. But then all of a sudden the numbers jump through the roof. These things you don't pick up when violence is 50% in the house and 50% in the public spaces. That's part of the nuance of integrating your approach. Similarly with youth, you can't do job placements or unemployment intervention without career guidance and without supporting those measures. And we've been doing that for 5 or 6 years, and 6,500 kids benefited through that thing. So when we talk about the impact of what you're trying to do, we know there are many more that have completed their studies. On a fact, only 10% of Helenvale have matric. So everybody else that does not have matric hits an automatic glass ceiling when they go out for a job. So how do you address that? Well, you do the kinds of things that Desira does and other people do. They come into the community, and through the schools, through the churches, there's an energy that gets unleashed, but we don't value that energy. We just see it and we think it's a nuisance because it doesn't come from government. And that is part of the missed opportunity. I think there is enormous value that we, as project planners and implementers, we see on the ground, but we can't systematize because the system is anemic to that response from it, because it's too raw. And part of the developmental challenge is to say, let's strengthen capacity at a grassroots level so that they can fend for themselves in bringing the opportunities to bear. And all we can do as enablers is to make that journey a little bit more planning orientated, a little bit more so that we can look at the bigger questions, but the fundamentals, it's there for all to see.
Okay, again, we are not trying to say everything that is in the book. The book is available for everyone to actually leave with a copy tonight. And due to time, we don't have much time left. But I still want to hear the good things, maybe from, again, you, Neil, that you are proud of from the book. And then I'm going to go to Debbie to give us her 2 minutes closing remarks. And I still want to hear from Mrs. Davids a bit more on the good side.
I think for me personally, I get stopped every so often in the shopping centers by kids from Helenvale that went to one of the programs, and they saw us there, or they knew that we had been involved in some way or form. And seeing that energy is a positive. There is enormous goodwill in the community that we see replicated in various different ways. And I think that if we had to capture the successes, we'd have to spend a little bit more time and some resources in getting that. A big part of the problem that we had in writing this is to say, do we have the time under COVID conditions to go and look up the successes and to do a tracer study? And in fact, that was one of the suggestions, to do a tracer survey on those specific successes and where those people are. But I can tell you, in the 6-8 years that I've been in Helenvale, I know a lot of people, more than 200 individuals that I'm personally connected with on Facebook, and I can point their trajectory, their personal growth development from the moment they've been involved in programs like these.
Thank you. Debbie?
Yeah, there's so much to say. It's difficult in terms of closing remarks. I think for us is, I think the learning is important. I said earlier, the process is sometimes even more important than the product. The stadium experience, maybe I must explain, I think we referred to that. What does that mean? You know, when the project stopped in 2017, under huge contestation, I think it was PAC, we established the HDF, there were huge divisions, political uncertainty, and also it was like apex gang fights. It was really, really unsafe. I mean, we would not be able to go into the area for weeks at a time. And we stood to lose the balance of the funding. I mean, I'm talking now about 60 million rand still to be spent on the project. And I like to tell my team, we had a come to Jesus discussion. Where do we go from here? Do we pack it up? And my fear was that if we do that, we will regret it for the rest of our lives. And there was a time that we put heads together with the community leaders from Helenvale, and said, this is ours to lose. The community convinced us that we will get together, put shoulder to the wheel, we'll squash our differences, and for the sake of this project, we commit. Interestingly, we could not have that discussion in Helenvale. It was so divided. I don't know if you know Helenvale, but the Gat at the bottom, Barcelona, Extension 12, Extension 5. If you live up there, you don't just take a walk to the HRC. You've got to cross various gang territories. And it's not just you. It's not even that you are affiliated to gang, but it's assumed that your child or your uncle or your nephew, or I mean, everybody is sort of related, you know. It's a very tight community. And we couldn't meet at a multi-million rand center that's been built for the community because it's not neutral ground. We decided to take the various formations and sectors and representatives out of Helenvale. We took them to the stadium. Do you know how difficult it is, the logistics of trying to bus groupings that might fight on the taxi and have them arrive at different times, because we didn't want for all them to stand in one queue because the conflicts were that deep. Boardmaker Kaduka, my team said, no cutlery, no crockery, it will be weapons. We had to make a deep call to say, if you're scared, go home. We're going to treat our people with respect. Ek soek glass, ek soek die plastic koppies and everything. I want glasses, I want cutlery, whatever. We have to show a bit of faith. So to me, that was a watershed moment in the program. Is that commitment and us showing a bit of faith and leadership in our fellow community members. And that started a process of several engagements at the stadium until we pulled that project back. So a project that was stuck for years, we completed in months. It can be done. We have to pull together. So I think closing remarks, that to me was a transformational thing in my own understanding of put yourself out there. Have faith in the process. I was challenged. Gaan ons nou gangsters aanstel om die projekte te watch? Jy gee net vir hulle geld om gunne te koop. The point of the program was to transform lives. So give that guy a chance. Appoint him, and every time we were proved wrong and we were pleasantly surprised. Not one incident.
Thank you.
Be part of the conversation. For more information, visit www.mbda.co.za.
Desira, you have again a peculiar view to the issue, and I'm happy that even in the process you've managed to improve academically, and you're taking off masters and social work, psychosocial interventions. What would you like to see happening?
Yeah, I've been waiting for that question. Listening to Debbie, and also when we had a colloquium, I think a few years back, pre-COVID, it was the initial, commitment from MBDA to be involved in Helenvale post-SPUU. For the 5 years that Debbie just mentioned, I would like to see, and I think, frankly speaking, because I said to Neil, I'm not going to sugarcoat, because in any case, I'm going to be fought by my people when I leave here. There was no program for the Lampand youth, and that was what was actually really, as a social worker and also as a community member and as a person who has been involved in, so many engagements with the youth that is involved in gangs in my community. And experiencing firsthand how many of them do not want to be part of that life anymore, but there's no alternative. And at the end of the day, I experienced it personally that this thing of a job stops a bullet or stops, it does not work. If you do not have an opportunity for employment coupled with a psychosocial program for the Lampand youth in Helenvale, we will not deal with the issue of gangsterism effectively. And if I look at the overall objective of the SPUU was to create a better quality of life for the people of Helenvale, specifically with the emphasis of the reduction of crime and violence, I would suggest that MBDA really change their objectives, and I think Debbie would concur if you look at the learned lessons taken out of the couple of years they've been in my community. The Lampand youth and the youth involved in gangsterism or in conflict with the law is a part of our community. You cannot divorce them from the community. And I feel that really MBDA must, when you speak about youth development, Debbie, Lampand youth, youth involved in gangs, at-risk youth, they are the children, the program that we've been talking about, that we've been running on the pre-primary schools with the grade 7 boys. I'm implementing the findings of my research because it was focused on protective factors that could prevent more young boys from becoming involved in gangs. And, if MBDA could look at such a program, in fact, taking it from the existing organizations, like our organization have piloted it, and the successes of the program, and if it could be adopted as a program from MBDA, I think you cannot divorce, like I said, those are children that come from families in Helenvale. Those are kids that come from broken homes, like you said, dysfunctional families. And if there's not a program to include them, at the end of the day, you would never have a safer, violence-free, crime-free. It is a pipe dream to think that you could have and achieve a safer, Helenvale with the reduction of crime and violence if you do not have a program for lumpen youth specifically and youth involved in gangs?
Thank you very much, everyone. We can definitely see the need to continue doing work in Helenvale. We can definitely see that development work is a messy business. It claims lives, right? It's not just money, it's the people's health. It's the development practitioners' health. As we heard, Bulelane also was rescued by a lady in the community who stood in front of gangs and said that, no, we're going to do an assessment, and Bulelane, as a big man that he is, was rescued, by this lady. And it has changed lives. It has given us gems as well. Community activists, people that can fight and stand in the gap. It has given us case studies for developmental practitioners across the globe. It has given us much more than we thought we could get out of Helenvale. Thank you very much for taking this opportunity and come, and help us put a picture and a face to Helenvale. Thank you very much.
From the implementers of safety and peace through an urban upgrading program funded by KFW comes a story of resilience and lessons. Helenvale, the book, gives you a closer look into the hopes and dreams of a challenged community, a common story across South Africa. Helenvale, a story of resilience and lessons for development practitioners. Available for download at helenvalestory.co.za or email helenvalestory@mbda.co.za for your free copy today. For more intriguing MBDA conversations, follow the MBDA on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Please subscribe and share this podcast. Also visit the MBDA website and send us your questions or views via the MBDA WhatsApp line on 072 423 0271. Thank you for joining us. Till next time.